Before the Christian religion was established, there was another philosophy that had picked up from the classical era and coalesced in the late first century among Jewish and Christian sects. Many hold that the Gnostics later wrapped themselves in a Christian form, though some also believe that the Gnostics were always Christian and that the movement began in the first century itself. The Gnostics drew the attention and condemnation of the pagan Platonic philosopher Plotinus, claiming that the Gnostics drew most of their knowledge from pagan traditions. The truth, as we will see, is far from clear and always hidden in its own mysteries. I'm the Desert Viking, Esoteric Freemason, and today we continue the Builder's Workshop with what I consider to be an extension of the cornerstone of my own beliefs, the Gnostic tradition. Good day, everybody. So we've talked about Hermetic philosophies up to this point, and now it's time to move into another realm of where do I even begin with the study of esotericism. Now, I started with the Hermetic philosophies because the Hermetic traditions are largely rooted in everything esoteric. Any type of mystery studies that you undertake will, in some way, minorly or majorly, reflect the Hermetic principles and philosophies. So that was a great place to start. When it comes to my own foundations, and that's where I'm coming from with these videos, is exploring my own path to give someone who's no idea where to begin an idea of where I mapped myself. The next great cornerstone that I had laid out was Freemasonry. But an extension of Freemasonry is Gnosticism. Now, up to this point in my life, I was raised Catholic. And from Catholic, I went to Catholic school, I went to catechism, took the Holy Communion, all that. My parents decided when I was 14 in high school that they felt compelled to move to be a little bit more outspoken. And so they became Pentecostals in the Assemblies of God. So I went from one extreme to the other. Now, I happened to enjoy Catholicism. I enjoy the ritual. I enjoy the just the sanctity and the feel that I get from being in a church. I still burn church incense to this day in my home. There was something in there that moved me. The Pentecostals, I'm a very subdued individual normally, unless you get me going, and I can be pretty hot-headed. But I'm more of a quiet person, so we'll just say that the Pentecostal religion, the way they do things, is a little bit anti-me. It's a little loud for my taste. However, all that aside, I always had a problem. And I've mentioned this problem before. And my problems always stemmed from, as a boy, that the belief structure of what I believe is the only correct way to believe and what you believe, if it's different than me, is bad and it's wrong. And you're going to burn in a hell. I've always had a problem with that. It didn't make sense because I started picking up things. Number one, just as a boy, when you're growing up, you basically believe everything you're told by your parents. And then you find out Santa Claus isn't real. And then you start to see some of the things you learn in school may not be real. And it's just a downward sloping slide from there, right? But as Catholics, we lived across from the Assemblies of God Church. I grew up across from one. And they used to have a meetup for their young people. I think they called it the Royal Rangers. And I remember my mom making fun of them calling them the Royal Strangers, because that was a cult. That was a weird. Those were weird people. That was a cult. When my mom, when they switched over to being Pentecostals and went to that very church, I remember her talking later that the Catholic Church was a cult. And I'm laughing because for a 15-year-old me to hear this, I'm seeing this like whatever church I'm in is right, and those guys, that's a cult. And these were within the Christian faith. Bear this in mind. And I knew several people like this. And that always, that was a very important young lesson for me. And then I started noticing another thing, that whatever region you were born into tended to be, not always, but most often tended to be the religion that you would pick up. So if you're born in the United States, odds are you're probably a Christian of some type. If you were born in the Middle East, odds are that you follow the faith of Islam. If you're born in Israel, odds are that you are Jewish. If you're born in the East, India, China, you've got Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism. I noticed that it mattered where you were born, because that was the regional religion that you were probably going to be practicing. And then I noticed that common underlying current in all of them was that I'm right, what I was taught was right, and all these other people are bad. That's the devil. They're going to burn in hell. They'll find out. They'll find out how wrong they were because they just happened to be born in the wrong place. And that never sat well with me. And so I have always been a spiritual individual. I have always felt the presence of God. I have always rejected the concept of religion. And years later, now that I'm an older man, when I was a seeker, which is a term that can be used to indicate someone seeking the light, I use it for those interested in Freemasonry that have not yet been initiated, but seeker can apply to any tradition. But while I was a seeker, I started delving into the history of Freemasonry. And the first thing I'll tell you is no one can agree on the history of Freemasonry. Many will try to claim that they know, but they don't. There have been many, many books written on the subject. This isn't the video to go over the history of Freemasonry, but we'll just say there's not agreement on where they came from. However, I did start to notice there is some symbology that ties into the Gnostic faith or the Gnostic traditions. And lo and behold, one of the legends of Freemasonry is that it was formed by the Knights Templar, after the Knights Templar were driven into hiding. And this is the legend that I believe. This is the one that makes the most sense to me. Can I prove this? No. Am I here to tell you that it's the God's honest truth? I could not. I don't have the authority to do that, nor will I ever claim to. So this is just what feels right to me here. But that the Templars, to hide in plain sight, assumed the form of stone. They're stonemasons, and incorporated the symbologies and rituals that were a part of that order. And that from that stemmed the Rosicrucian order and the Freemasonic order, which I consider to be cousins of each other, carrying forth the mystery schools. Now, why that's important is that allegedly the Knights Templar were formed from 9 French knights of Gnostic families. So I started to go, I wonder what's up with all this Gnostic stuff. Because I had known the word, but I had never really studied Gnosticism until I became a seeker. And so, I'm reading the history of the Freemasons. I'm reading the history of the Templars. I'm reading about Gnosticism. And so I was directed to the Apocryphon of John, the secret gospel or the secret book of John. And I read that. And that's the book we're actually going to read on this channel next. And after having read that book, it took me 2 days. It's not very large. All of the bells inside of me were going off. And I tend to have 2 bells. The first one rings, and there's a strong, sour note. I call it the bell of discord. And when the bell of discord goes off inside of me, I tend to pay attention because that means something in my presence is false in my judgment. Sometimes I don't even mean to judge it. It comes off. A person that won't vibe with me, you can get their vibrations. And it just, the bell of discord will go off. And everything I was talking about with like my earlier religious experience, the bell of discord rang often within me. Then I have a second bell. And that second bell is the bell of harmony or the bell of concordance. When that resonates within me, I pay attention because something has just now matched my vibration. Something has caught my attention. And it's very rare that I get to feel that in this world, on this plane. It's very, very rare. I felt it when I knocked on the door of the lodge. I have felt it in the presence of a few people in my life. I felt it very strongly after I had read the Apocryphon of John. And so I wanted to know more. Gnostic tradition, much like Hermetic tradition, is woven into the fabric of a lot of the mystery school teachings and a lot of magic in general. As such, I find it to be useful to at least read once, at least to understand once. And that's not to advocate that you need to follow the Gnostic tradition, but be aware of its existence, because a lot of what you're going to be walking will be tales from that tradition. Now, with Gnosticism is a hot word. To a devout Christian person who knows their world religious histories, Gnosticism is a dirty word. It's a bad word. It's as bad as the word occult. And to them, it all means the same thing, which is the devil, evil, heresy, blasphemy. One of the greatest, I'm going to call it the fallings of man, happened at the beginning of the Common Era, in my opinion. At the beginning of the Common Era, religion, formalized religion, became the government, became the daddy, for lack of a better word. Now, religion wasn't invented at the advent of the Common Era. Plainly, you have pantheons from the Greeks and the Egyptians and the Assyrians and the Babylonians and native people and all the Eastern cultures. Right, religion is not a new invention of the Common Era. It goes back to our beginnings on this epoch of humanity, this fifth epoch that we currently reside in, post-Diluvian. And I believe even pre-Diluvian, religion has been a thing. Mankind was much more spiritual. And the Common Era came, and the church said, you don't need to think anymore. We got you covered. All you have to do is do what we tell you. You just have to think like we tell you to think, be where we tell you to be, and you will go to heaven. And thinking is bad. Like if you're a free thinker, the devil's probably putting ideas in your head. I know I grew up being told that free thinkers were Satan's slaves. In fact, that very message was put on the front of the church. They have those signs in the beginning in the front of the parking lot. And they'll have, you put letters there to make signs. Well, I remember very clearly one week was the free thinker is Satan's slave or something like that. And I remember the bell of discord went off in me strongly. So it's like, so you're saying thinking is bad. So Gnosticism is as bad to a learned scholar of the Christian religion, if they are of that faith, because it goes against what they were taught is the one true thing. Much like the word occult is if I use the word occult, I try to avoid that word because of the connotations. When I use that word, most people think of like hooded, shadowy figures, goat sacrificing and stuff, and raising the devil, or some stuff that's not even remotely true. That's all fantasy island. The word occult just means hidden or secret. Gnosticism is a wide array of topics and subject matter that is argued on when it began. From my own research, Gnosticism began, it was around late antiquity, and it was a product of the thinkers, Plato and Aristotle and Pythagoras. And Pythagoras ran a mystery school. That to me is where it began. And in some academic journals that I have read, some will claim that Jesus Christ, who was a rabbi, would have studied Gnosticism, which predates Gnosticism before Christianity, and it kind of becomes Christianity, or it helped build what Christianity is. I'm going to be honest when I say no one really knows where it began. No one really knows. It, like many things, was ideas, a collection of ideas that people had, some similar, some vastly opposing each other, and people bickered and fought over whose idea was the right one. And so what happened was, from the first century, when a lot of the New Testament was written, there was a lot going on in the world, a lot of bad things going on in the world. There was a pope, or he's pope now, by the name of Irenaeus, who was essentially the church's first inquisitor, and he really did not like the Gnostics. And in fact, that was the only source we had as people of what the Gnostics believed came from his writings, the heresies. That's what he called them, the heresies. Because what happened with those people was that for a couple hundred years, there was no consensus on what Christianity was. And so, in the year 326, at the Council of Nicaea, Emperor Constantine assembled the superpowers to determine what Christianity was supposed to be, claiming that their decision was ruled by the Holy Spirit. It's very convenient that he can claim that. But he was the emperor, so no one's going to contest him. And so he claimed that the books that he approved, or that council approved, that was gospel, that was canon. Everything else was mythological fairy tales and garbage. And shortly after that, in the 400s, there was another emperor who started to enforce that. I believe his name was Thessidonius, Emperor Thessidonius. And I could be wrong with that name. It began with a T. And he was the one that basically expelled the mystery schools from Alexandria, and that's when the library and all the temples were burned. And those individuals, the mystery schools, fled to Turkey, what is now Turkey, and Iraq, Baghdad. But during that time, in the Common Era, much was lost. Thinking became bad. Thinking is demonized. If you think for yourself, or you're trying to research and find the answers outside of what you're told, that's bad. That's evil. That's Satan. So naturally, someone like me is going to oppose that at every turn. But we did not know anything about Gnosticism because all of the books had been burned, and the people who continued to practice it would have been either driven out or killed. They weren't playing around. No one was going to be caught dead with those books. And in 1945, in Egypt, you have what's called the Nag Hammadi texts were discovered, which was a series of Gnostic books preserved, buried in a cave. And that's where we have the text today. We're fortunate. We can actually read what it was that was expelled from the Bible. All of the forbidden books. I'm not sure if the Book of Enoch is considered Gnostic. Of course, the Book of Enoch was long removed from the Bible as well, so I would just group it with that. The Book of Enoch is still a part of the official Ethiopian Bible, and I know that Freemasons from the 1700s rediscovered the Book of Enoch, because up to the point in the 1700s, it was like all the other Gnostic texts. It was this legend, but no one had any access to it. And there was a Freemason whose name escapes me, and this is in the 18th century. He went over and he rediscovered it, and brought it back. And I know Enoch, the Book of Enoch, plays a fairly significant role in Freemasonry in some of the degrees. So up to that point, all we knew was what Pope Irenaeus had decried the Gnostics for. There are a number of books that were removed that we have access to now. So if I want to kind of summarize Gnosticism, which is what we want to do here, just to kind of give you an idea of what is it. Number one, I can't find agreement on what Gnosticism is, and I'm in a part of several groups, and there's constant back and forth bickering, mostly fine, but sometimes you get people who get really heated about the definition of Gnosticism. A lot of people consider Gnosticism the esoteric branch of Christianity. It has, for all intents and purposes today, enveloped the mystical side of Christianity. Some will fiercely oppose that and say it came from before Christianity. And at that point, I just think that's splitting hairs just to win an argument. Regardless, Gnosticism believes a few things that are considered blasphemous to the church. The first big one is that you don't need a priest or the church to commune with God. Now you can see why that would make the church angry, why they would call that heresy. To a Gnostic, the temple of God, the kingdom of heaven, resides here, inside of you. And that you always have the ability to communicate with God. Now this, again, that pisses the church off. That you would even say that is gross blasphemy. You need the priests. You need to pay your tithes to the church. They need the gold-plated toilets that they sit on. I know I'm being a little snarky there. 2, something that used to make me wonder, because we had to read the Bible all the time, so I'm not going to tell you I'm a biblical scholar, but I've had to read it. Old Testament God and New Testament God are very different gods. Old Testament God is really angry, really pissed off, really genocidal. He's kind of an asshole. New Testament God is loving and forgiving. And those two things, just to me, they're polar opposites of each other. You know, we're representing the Hermetic principle of duality very well in the Old and the New Testament. It never sat right with me. Well, the Gnostics believe that that's true, that Old Testament God isn't really God. That is, depending on the version of Gnostics that you follow, is either a malignant demon entity who has created this prison that we live on and seeks to keep us here, or if you follow the more forgiving Gnostic flavor, the Valentinians, that the Old Testament God was a misguided, accidental creature of Sophia who didn't mean to be an angry dick. He came off that way. So, and I'm summarizing quite a bit. There's no agreement on that, but the agreement is that Old Testament God wasn't God, ultimately. Now, again, you can see how the church would see that as blasphemous, because they take the Bible literally. Everything you read is literal, and the Bible literally says this is God, therefore that's God. The Gnostics believe that we live in a prison of some sorts, and we're trying to escape. Now, I believe that we humans we all contain the divine essence of God. We're like a shattered mirror. We're a broken piece of glass spread out across the globe, and we are trying to find our way back home, which takes several iterations. You're here to experience things. And if you're a Kabbalist, the Kabbalah, they talk about the 125 steps. So you descend to this plane and then you climb back up, and you're experiencing new things. We are made out of the essence of angels. We are made out of the essence of the universe. We are a part of God. And in fact, that's what sets us apart from angels, is that we have the ability to experience things on this plane that they cannot. And that we're here to collect those experiences until we've reached a point of knowledge where we can come back home. That's what I believe. I feel like a prisoner here on this plane. I also acknowledge that I can't prove any of that, nor will I forcefully say that what I believe is the only right, correct way, because I don't know that. That's just what rings true to me. And I've been told many, many times that everything I believe is wrong and it's the devil. And so if you're getting ready to leave a comment about that, I've already heard it many times. I don't believe it. So leave what you want. The Gnostics are interwoven with metaphysics and Hermeticism, because ultimately what we're here for, and again, I'm not going to preface everything with "in my opinion." I'm assuming everyone here knows that I'm talking about my own opinion. So I'm just going to go on from there. It's already prefaced. Now, based off of that, we all contain divine essence. We all contain God. We are trying to find our way back home. When we start talking about the word God and magic and all the woo-woo stuff, number one, I look at how words are defined. The word God to me does not mean magical, mythical space wizard floating in the air watching everything I do and writing it in a book so he can judge me on it. God is a word you would use for any creature who could destroy you, who just knows his level of technology or whatever is far surpassing you. Far surpasses you. I believe that humans were created, yes. I believe that science cannot explain the Homo sapien rapid advancement 200,000 years ago. I believe that God created us in his image, and in his image does not necessarily mean our visual image. Image can mean a lot of things. We were created and infused with what he chose to infuse us with. That in our chromosome, it's the second chromosome, I believe, the second pair, shows tampering and splicing or whatever. I've heard that from many different academics. That's where I choose to believe, because that sounds right. Even when I was young, I had to write a paper. I remember when I was in junior high, I was in Catholic school. Where do you think we came from? And before I even knew what an Anunnaki was, I said, well, it makes sense to me that, some other race showed up here and they needed gold, not for riches and wealth, but gold is a very useful metal. I knew this even as a 13-year-old boy. Gold is used for conductors, electricity, spacecraft. It's a cleaning agent. It can clean the air and whatnot. So gold is a very useful mineral. And I find that humans seem to be programmed to serve things. We like to serve, be told what to do and serve things. Most of us are very good at that. And I wrote that paper, and that's when I first learned what a Sumerian was and what the Anunnaki was, because that's the whole legend. So that was one of those whoa, cool. I thought I came up with something. No, you didn't really come up with originality. That's a legend. That comes from like the Epic of Gilgamesh and whatnot. So that's what I believe. And so God is just something like, if we could go back 2,000 years now, if I could walk through the gates of Jerusalem, in the year 24 AD, so Christ would still be alive, and I knew the things I knew now, and I had the military equipment we could have now, and I drove a tank through Jerusalem. It would be written down in the Bible. The steel dragon rolled through, the steel god dragon, or Apache helicopter. That would be some mythical god creature, because that's what we consider gods. I consider magic to be nothing more than just science that we haven't figured out yet. Same concept applies. Go back 2,000 years ago. Do some of the stuff we can do now. That would be considered magic. Magic is nothing more than relearning technology that we might have lost. So I don't consider any of that supernatural woo-woo as much as I consider rediscovering ourselves. The great work is something you'll hear spoken. And the great work is that concept of awakening yourself to complete why you're here, to begin to learn so that you can ascend and go home. I'll close all this off with the image over here off my shoulder. That is what you call the 231 gates. Those are the 22 Hebrew letters, each one connected to each other. Those were said to be the letters of creation. There's something mythical and magical with the Hebrew alphabet. The Bible, the Old Testament, was written in Hebrew. It is not the first set of legends. The Bible has many similarities with Babylonian and Sumerian legends. But the Hebrew alphabet is coded, or each of those letters represents a number. Not only that gets into something called Germatia, where you can take words that have the same numeric value and find why do they have the same value. It makes you think. It makes you read between the lines. But additionally, Hebrew words have different meanings. So a word can have multiple meanings, which means that if you ever were to sit down with the actual holy texts, untranslated, unmodified in the many different ways that they've been bastardized over the years into English to serve a political purpose. If you actually learn Hebrew, look at the holy texts, you're going to see that many places you're going to have to translate off of the context of what you're reading. And Jewish rabbis to this day argue about the meaning of the Torah because the words have multiple meanings. This is why I do not find the holy texts to be something that are meant to be read literally, especially once they've been translated out of Hebrew into Latin and English, because they are someone else's idea of what that should be, their translation. And that the keys, I do believe that the volumes of sacred law contain wisdoms that we need. But I don't think you're going to find them by reading the English versions. I think you're going to get some good morality stories. I think you're going to get some good guidance, for sure. But I don't think what you're actually looking for is going to easily, if at all possibly, found unless you're actually in biblical Hebrew, which is something that I'm pursuing. So when we next meet, I have several of these texts, but this is the Lost Gnostic Gospels. It's got several Gospels in it that were removed from the Bible. We will be reading from the Apocryphon of John, which is a small work. It is the one that was given to me to read first. It is the one that's recommended to go over first. So if you're interested in Gnosticism, we're going to read that. But if you wanted to read on your own, that is where I would say to start. And then from there, you can branch out into, there's all kinds of the books that were removed. The Book of Enoch is another one that I would suggest getting into. And so that's just going to kind of make you think. That's the whole point of going over the Gnostic Gospels, to make you think, make you ponder a little bit about what is real versus what you've been told and taught was real. And you're going to come up with your own conclusion. And it probably will not mirror mine, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. So long as you're thinking and so long as you're coming up with those conclusions on your own, I feel that I have been constructive here at this time. All right, so when next we meet, we will begin with the Apocryphon of John. Until that time, thank you for tuning in. If you like, give me a like and a subscribe, and we'll see you soon. This is the Desert Viking. Stay cool. Summer's coming in, especially if you live in the desert. We'll see you later.